The main topic for what we want to cover in this video is functions, but before we start, we're going to talk about a normal sub-procedure. Starting here at the top, we have a sub-procedure called calc prod to nums, and then we just A because there's two versions here. This is the traditional way. So far in this class, we've been calculating values. We've been declaring variables. Num1 and num2 are the two numbers that we're going to multiply. My product is going to have the product in it of the two numbers. And we've been doing something like this, where we've said, what is the first number? Notice that we have the input box function inside parentheses and then inside quotes to indicate that this is a character string. We have the string what is the first number, and we put that value into num1, and we do the same thing on num2. We call the input box function again. We ask what is the second number, and we put whatever the second number is into num2. We multiply num1 by num2, remembering always do the right side first. And we take the value of, or the product of num1 times num2 and put it here in my product. And then we usually have been displaying back in a message box to the user num1 times num2 is in my product. So we'll go through and step through this. I'm pressing F8. As we go through, you see we get the message box, what is the first number? And we get what is the second number? And we're going to multiply the first number, 5, times the second number, 7. And we're going to get 35. And we get the product of 5 times 7 is 35, hopefully. And we do, and that's the end. Now, what I want to talk about today is the sub and the parentheses here. These parentheses are for putting parameters or arguments in. These are values that the program requires to run, and they are sent to the program by another program. So if you have anything in between the parentheses, the program cannot be run by pressing F5 like we've just done here. Cannot be run by clicking this button here or anything else. It has to be called by another program. So I've taken this calc to prod nums, or prod to nums, doesn't make a lot of sense unless you realize let's calculate the product of two numbers, and I've converted it just a little bit. We'll leave it up here so you can see. What you'll notice is I have basically the same name, except for it doesn't have the A on it. I'm declaring my product as an integer, and I'm taking num1, multiplying it by num2, and putting the product into my product. But you'll notice that here at the top, in between the parentheses, I've included num1 as integer, which is the same as right here, except for without the dim, comma, num2 as integer, which is the same as right here, except without the dim. What this does is declare a variable that I can use within the context of this program, like we have here, but it requires that variable to be given me by another program, or another sub, or another function that is being run. Just like input box up here, we had to provide input box a prompt in order for it to run. If we look at, I'm just going to hit the space bar here, you notice that input box requires one argument, but you can offer 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 7 arguments that go into, or parameters that go into the input box as it runs. It will not run if we don't include the prompt. Everything else in the square bracket is optional. So if I were to try and run this program up here, what's going to happen as I run through, I'm going to get an error that says an argument is not optional here. What that means is that it is expecting, let's stop this here, I'm going to come back here, it is expecting a variable that is a prompt. It's expecting that prompt, we know, to be a string. or some sort of value. They're going to need some value to give to the user. If you don't include that, it can't run. And that's the same thing that we're doing right down here. We have this program. It's not input box, but it's called calc product of two numbers. And it requires, because they're not in square brackets, it requires two numbers here. And internally, whoever calls this program can call those two numbers whatever they want. As long as they're integers, this program will run properly. So what's going to happen when I try to run this, the first value that gets given me, I'm going to put into num1. The second value that gets given to me, I'm going to put into num2. I'm going to declare my product as an integer. I'm going to take whatever's in num1, multiply it by num2, and put it in my product. And then I'm going to use those in a message box. So let's watch what happens when I try to run it here. I'm pressing F8, but nothing happens, and I'm going to press F5, and it's going to say, okay, which would you like to run? And I have a bunch of macros or sub-procedures that have been written in this workbook, but none of them are calc prod 2 nums. Notice there's calc prod 2 nums A, which is this one here, but this doesn't require any arguments or parameters, and so this one can run just fine. However, this one here will not run because I have arguments and parameters. The only way I can run it is from another program. So I've written another program here called test calc prod 2 nums. Obviously I'm testing this one here. The way I call another sub is just the way I'd call an input box or message box by putting its name. When I call a sub is not a function. And a function like the input box function is capable of returning a value, just like the input box will return into whatever's on the left side of the parentheses, whatever was typed in the text box. A sub will not do that. So this is not a sub, this is a function. A function returns a value. A sub does not return a value, or is not required to return a value. And so what we can do is we just type the name of the program that we want to run. So I'm going to redo this again. Notice when I put a space here, it's going to show me the same thing that I have here. It is expecting two integers to be given to it. So I'm going to put the first integer here as 7. As I put a comma, it says, okay, what's the next integer? And that's why that's highlighted here. And I'm going to enter another number here. And now what's happening is this will run. Because it is not a function, I don't need to put an equal sign here to try and capture the value. It will just run that subprogram and pass it those two values. So as we go ahead and run, I'm going to press F8. Notice that the value in num1 is 7, and the value in num2 is 23. So as it goes through, it's going to take 7 times 23. Product is 161, and it's going to return that. And it's going to finish calc prod 2 nums, and then it's going to come back here to the test that ran it, and it's going to be done. Now, one thing to remember is that a sub or a function that requires arguments will take the arguments in the order given. If I put 23 here and I put 7 here, it will run just as it did before, except you'll note that 23 is in the first number and 7 is in the second number. What I'm really trying to show you here is, once again, it's not going to try and evaluate the number and say, does this look like what I'm looking for? It takes the very first number for argument and puts it in the first variable. It takes the second argument and puts it in the second variable. So what we first saw was just running a normal program where we have to prompt the user for values. We could have also come in here and just said something like num1 is 23 and num2 is 5 or something like that, and that would have been essentially the same. But basically we have to, from somewhere else, get the number. But it has to be all contained within this program. When we add arguments, we can run a program and declare variables. The arguments are declared as variables, and we can go ahead and run a program without having to ask for the user, but caveat is the program will not run unless we provide it some values at the time of running, so then we have to call it from the test sort of thing. So we're going to take this one step further, and we're going to have this function called calcprod2nums function. So I've changed. Notice instead of typing sub like I did here, I typed function here, and it automatically puts end function down here at the bottom instead of end sub like on another one. We have a couple of things here. Notice I have my num1 as an integer, and I have num2 as an integer. Now, one thing that a function does for me that a sub does not do for me is I can add on here as integer. Notice when I come up here to test calcprod2nums, it doesn't have anything after the last parenthesis because there's nothing here, and I can't put anything after the parenthesis on a sub. However, notice on my input boxes are functions just like this function that I'm writing down here. And notice when I look at this, at the end it has as string. This tells me what data type is going to be returned through the equal sign into whatever variable is waiting to capture whatever is returned from this function. So when I come down here to calcprod2nums func, what's happening is I am requesting the program that calls me to give me two numbers just like we did here, and I am going to give back an integer. So you see that everything is here as we had before. We have dim my product as integer. We have my product equal num1 times num2. Now instead of giving a message box, I'm going to take the product and put it into a variable that has the identical name as the name of the function. Whenever I create a function, that implicitly I'm also creating a variable that can be used within the function that has an identical name to the function. So you notice I haven't dimmed this anywhere, it's not in the parentheses or anything like that, but I have this variable here that I can use that has the same name as the function. And just like this will allow me, just like I can take a value coming from the input box that was typed in and put it in a variable, doing this will allow me to put the function, or excuse me, the calculation. As soon as I put a value into here, it will allow me to put that value into whoever called me. So I'm going to write a test here. Okay, it's just a sub, so I don't have to give any arguments if I don't want to. In functions, I don't necessarily have to give arguments. And I'm going to say the answer as integer. The answer is equal to calc. Notice here I'm going to put a parenthesis. If I ever use parentheses, I have to use the equal sign. If I use the equal sign, I have to use parentheses. And notice it's going to prompt me. It's going to ask for num1, so I can give it 34, and put a comma there. It's going to ask me for num2, which will say 3. I'll put my close parenthesis, and it's ready to run. So now let's run this and see what happens. So step through. I'm going to call calcprod2nums function. It put 34 in the first value. It put 3 in the second value. Obviously, there's nothing there. It's just a data type. And we're going to come through. We're going to take 34, multiply it by 3, put the value in product, or my product, which is 102. And we're going to move it from my product here to prod2nums func. So now it has 102 in it. Notice it was 0 before. And Now as I come back here, it took the value that was up here. Notice this function is finished running. I can't get anything out of it, but it took the value that was in calc prod 2nums func and it put it in my answer. So now I can go on and I can use this function. Another way that I can use this function is in Excel. Now as you see over here, I have a mini sales sheet of some sort. I have some inventory IDs, I have descriptions, I have price, and I have quantity, and I want to calculate an extension. Now it's pretty easy to calculate the extension by saying equal this times that. In other words, we have one number times the other, and we're putting the product right here. Well, just as a simple test of the functions and how they work, what we're going to do is take calc prod 2nums func. We're going to put it here, and we're going to say calculate that times that. Now you'll notice a couple of things. There's a lot of ways to insert this. I can go to insert, I can go to formulas, and I can go to more functions, and I'm not going to find anything that I've defined here in more functions, in math and trig, lookup and reference, anything here. But when I do go to insert function, either by pressing this or by pressing this, I'm going to have a section, wrong spot. I'm going to have a section right here called user defined, and this will give me all of the functions that I've created. Notice that I have calc prod 2nums func. So I can go ahead and select that, and it's going to say, hey, where is num1? And I'll just click right there and say, where is num2? And I'll click right there. Notice it will calculate the 2. It's running the function telling me what the formula result is going to be, and it puts that there. Now we have a little bit of a problem here as we're looking at this. We have the answer of 18, and 3 times 5.86 is not 18. Well, let's look at our function and see if we can figure out what's going on. I'm receiving num1 as an integer and num2 as an integer. So I'm going to just click right here on the function so that every time this function runs, I can go ahead and stop the function and see what's going on. So I'm going to insert, another way I can insert this here is just press the equal sign and start typing, and as I start to type, it will go ahead and give me all my choices, and you'll see that here's the one that I created here. So I can just hit tab and select that. Notice it doesn't tell me what I'm supposed to be entering here, but if I do use the function, I can get my first number and my second number. That's going to be 32, and before it puts it here, now it's going to take me through step by step and run this, and notice that I've got 8 and I've got 4. Here's the problem. Before, when I was just calculating integers, then it worked just fine. But here I have doubles or currency, anyway, something with a decimal. So I'm probably going to need to change these from integer to a double, and from an integer to a double. Now, it's not likely that the quantity is going to be a double, but I also want it, so now if we were to run this, it'll reset, of course. I'll come over here and delete, and we'll insert again. Stop that. Alright, and that also has an error. That's stopped. So let's go ahead and try and run this. I'm looking for 2 nums. There's num1 and num2. Notice it's going to give me, as we go through here, it gave me 32. What's the problem? Well, I took 2 doubles. I took 7.9 and I took 4, multiplied them together, and it gave me 32. What's happening in my product is a double, so it's not accepting decimals. So it's going to put 32 right there. So I need to change this also to be able to give back a double or something that carries a decimal. So we're going to give this one more shot here. And if I know that it takes two values, I can click there, go ahead and close this. Notice now as I go through, let's see. Sorry, it didn't finish executing from before. So now as I go through, there we go. We got 5.86, and we've got 3, and the product Okay, now we have my product that is also as an integer, so it's going to round our values. So we need to make sure to change that to a double also. Now, as we come here, and we say insert this number times this number, so now as we run, what we're going to do, we'll just come here, and we'll go to our calc, and we know it's this number, and we know it's this number, and it's 17.58, and we can just drag this down, and it will calculate all the way down. Now, did we really need to create a function in order to multiply that number times that number? It probably would have been easier to just come and put the formula in here for that times that. But what I'm hoping to illustrate is how the function works. You need to be careful that your values coming in, if they're going to be integers, and you can leave them as integers. And if you want to give an integer back, you can leave them as integers. But if you want to receive decimal or numbers that hold decimals as well as integers, then you need to make sure that you have doubles here, at least doubles, or some other thing. Now, you didn't have to say my product is equal to num1 times num2 and then take my product and put it there. You could have gone a shortcut route here and just said num1 or calc prod 2numsfunc is equal to num1 times num2, and that would have eliminated these three lines. Okay, so we're going to move on just a little bit. We've got another function here that calculates taxes, and it's just one line, kind of like that one was. And I'm going to come here onto the Excel screen and notice that we've got a subtotal line here. So I'm just going to sum up. I'm going to sum up everything here. And so the total of this order is 218.45. And I have this function here that's going to calculate taxes for me. Notice it's only going to receive one parameter or argument, and it's expecting it to be a double, and it's going to give a double back. So notice that I have this implicit variable, calc tax, is the same as the function name. I'm going to take the sale amount, so someone's going to have to give me a sale amount. I'm going to multiply that by 0.06, and that's going to give me a tax. So if I come over here, there's my calc tax. If I don't know what goes there, I'm looking for a sale amount, so I can just select that sale amount right here. It tells me the previous, it'll be 1411. And so there's my function for calc tax. So as you can see, all we did was take the name here after function. In the parentheses, we put sale amount, the data type that we were expecting to be given to us, and we've said as double because that's what calc tax is going to be, and that's what it's going to give back to wherever this function is called. So we can call it in Excel like we've done here, or we just put equal calc tax, and then the cell, or we could have typed a value in there if we wanted to, and it gave us 6% of that number. Now we can also use a function in another sub. So here's one here, and as we run through this, notice that this is a sub. It doesn't have any arguments, doesn't return any values. There are two variables, sum amount as a double and then sum amount with tax. So sum amount is $729.23. And what we're going to do, notice this is very much like the input box function. If we come up here, we have some variable that's going to capture the value that comes back from input box, and then the argument is in parentheses. So here we are, and we're going to pass sum amount, which is $729.23. Here, we're going to calculate the tax amount, and we're going to send it back and put it over here in sum tax amount, which is currently 0, but now I press F8. It jumps to the calc tax function. It's going to do the calculation. So now my calc tax is $43.75. Notice that this is empty. Now I'm going to come back and go to the next line. It put $43.75 into some amount tax, and then it's going to give me a message box back and tell me that the tax on this sale amount is $43.75. So what I've tried to demonstrate here is how you can use a sub in an Excel spreadsheet like we did here, where we just equal, put the name in, and either put a reference to a value or put a value in there, and how we can call that same function from within another program. Now I've done a couple of other functions here that I'd like to talk about for just a second. Get price. Now over here on this inventory sheet, I can select an inventory ID, and as I select the ID, I want it to be able to bring up a description and bring up a price based on the ID. So I have two functions here. One is get price, and the other one, let's see, make sure you can see everything there. The other one is get other info. You'll notice here I've selected get other info. Let's take a look at get other info. What's going on is it is expecting a string that is an inventory ID. And it's going to start on row 2 of the sheet named mnemonic key. So it's a sheet over here. We can't quite see it. We'll look at it in just a second. And it's going to read that sheet starting in row 2, column 1, until the inventory sheet, or the value in the row I'm on, column 1, is equal to the inventory ID that got passed into this function, and it's going to keep looping down until it finds a match. So we have here, this is the mnemonic key. Let me stretch this out just a little bit. This is our mnemonic key, and what I'm looking to do is I'm coming here, and I just have data validation. I can go through and I can select anyone. I'm going to select the third one from the top, INVHCSMABLA. So as I select this, notice I get a hoodie, cotton, small black, and I get the price. Well, how did it know to do that? Well, when this ran, and we'll come in and take a look at this in just a second, when this ran, it got the inventory ID, which was INVHC or whatever it was the cotton hoodie, and it looped down until it found it. Let me go back and just double check what that was. INVHCOSMABLA. Great. INVHC I have to look one more time. Hoodie, cotton, small black. This is also mnemonic for that. So here we go. This is the one that it found, and here's, so it put all of these together. So it got this INVHCOSMABLA, and it looped down, starting in row 2, and continued down until that ID matched what it was seeing right here. When it found that match, it went over to rows 2 and combined it with column 2 and column 3 and column 4 and column 5, which is the hoodie, cotton, small, black. It combined them into one string, and you notice it put it into a variable named getOtherInfo, which is the same name as the function. So let's go to Excel. We'll look here. Here we have a function, getOtherInfo. I'll just redo it. And you notice it is just looking for an inventory ID. So the inventory ID is going to be in this cell. There's nothing there now, so I'm not going to return anything. But I have that formula there, so that when I do select something, it automatically goes out and finds the description. Now you notice the same thing going on here with price. I called it getPrice, and excuse me, you'll notice it has an inventory ID that it's looking for, and it's this, instead of giving back a string like this one gave back, it's going to give back currency. We start again on row 2, and we go until the value in column 1 of the mnemonic key sheet is equal to the inventory ID. This is identical to what we had here. And when we find it, then all I'm going to do is take whatever is in column 7, which is the price, and I'm going to put it right here. And you'll notice here that when I put in a quantity, that the extension automatically is calculated, and that's because we're using the calcprod2nums function here. Which is what we used before to have two numbers given to us. We do the calculation and put the result there. Now, all we need to do is say total is equal to that plus that. I suppose we could write some function, but I don't think that would have much educational value at this point. So once again, this getPrice and getOtherInfo function, they both accept an inventory ID, but one returns all of this description information, and the other one returns the price information. And we have this extension being calculated by the calcprod2nums function. We have the tax being calculated by the calctax function. Now there's just a couple more here that I want to take a look at. This first one here is getBlankRow. This is the function that if you give it a sheet name, that it will go ahead and tell you where the first blank row on that sheet is. Notice, let me see if I can stretch this out just a little bit. Notice that it needs a name, a sheet name, a starting row, and a starting column, and it will give you back the integer representing the row that is empty. So I come here, and I go to whatever sheet they've given me, whatever row and whatever column they've given me, and start adding one to the column. And I'm going to add one to the row, and I'm going to add one to the row until I find one where on the sheet I'm on, in the row, in the column that I'm on, it's empty. As soon as that's empty, it's going to take start row, put the value in getBlankRow, and return it to me. So let me test this out real quick. What I might do is come here and say sub test getBlankRow. This is a very useful function for anytime you're repetitively looking for an empty row on a sheet to put a customer name or an inventory ID or an order or something on there. I'm just going to blank row as integer, and I'm going to have it, let's see, blank row, and I'm going to call the function get blank row, and notice it's looking for a sheet name, so I'm going to give it the name of mnemonic key is the name of the sheet. What row should I start in? Start in row 1 and start in column 1. And we'll just put a message box on here. And we'll put this on here. We'll go ahead and run this. Notice it's going over here. The sheet name is mnemonic key, the row is 1, the column is 1, and it's going to start looping. It's actually going to loop for quite a long time. What row are we on now? We've got to get down several, couple hundred or a few hundred rows. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to I'll just put a stop there, so press F5. So it's looped through the requisite number of times. Start row is 926. Blank row is 0 because I have not put the value there. Now I've put the value there, and I come back here to the line just below where I left. And it's going to tell me that the first blank row on the sheet is 926. So I'm just going to go check. Mnemonic key, go down to the bottom, and the first blank row is 926. So this is pretty valuable to go find a blank row so that you can put stuff somewhere. I'm going to go back here to the purchase order. Here's one that will clear blank rows. And so what I'm going to do here, you'll notice it's, or excuse me, not clear blank rows, but clear rows that have a value in them. And so this is not a function, but you notice that it's accepting an input or an argument or a parameter for a row and for a column. And as I run this, I can't run it and press F8, and it won't run because it has these arguments. I have to come down here to test clear column. As I run it, I'm going to start in row 1, column 1. So it's going to say row 1, column 1. And it's going to check, and it's going to say, is row 1, column 1 empty? Well, as we're looking here, no, it's not empty. It's got inventory ID on it. I'm going to save this before I go on. Anyway, now as I press F8, notice that it deleted it. It set row 1, column 1 to empty, and it's going to the next row. And it's going to check, is it empty? No. So it's going to go through. Now, because I have a function here, my getOtherInfo function, that it depends on what value is here, I'm going to rerun this function as this changes here. Now we're going to stop that because I want to press F8 all the way through it. But because it doesn't find a value there, then I'm going to get an error because it's going to say, whoa, there's no value there. I can't go out and find it. So one thing you want to be careful of is that as you create functions, as our get price and our get other row, as you create functions and as you insert them, make sure that you don't change the values. Now, as I've been able to change that back, you notice that these immediately brought values back. So we've covered a lot of ground. I hope that helps you in your understanding of functions.